Hi, I'm Sydney.
And I'm Heather, and we're back for another Plant Fact Friday at the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden. And this week we're talking all about seasonal greenery. So these are plants that really evoke the holiday season. And we're going to start by talking about some evergreen plants. We have just a few evergreens that are native to Iowa, but that doesn't mean we don't see them all over the place because we planted things from other places and we also use them in our holiday decor. So Sydney, let's begin by talking about how to identify some of these plants.
Sure, we're going to start with pine. So all pine species grow in fascicles or clusters on the twig. And this pine in particular, you can tell the needles are really kind of fluffy and feathery. And it is actually a white pine because its needles grow in a cluster or a fascicle of 5, just like the 5 letters in white. So remember, pines grow in clusters together. Their needles do. Next, we're going to take a look at spruce and firs. And the easiest way and quickest way to tell the difference between these two genus is to actually touch them. Spruces are spiky. Firs are friendly. There are a couple other clues you can use by looking closer. So we'll start with our spruce. If we look at spruce, you can see that all the needles are attached individually to the twig. That will be the same in fir. It's different than pines, which grow on those fascicles. But each spruce needle has a little woody projection that it's growing from. So you can kind of see that it looks a little more orange on this sample. And then if you hold an individual needle, you can actually roll that needle between your fingers. So that is only true of spruce. Now, if we move to our fir sample, again, the needles are going to grow individually on that twig, and they are flat, so you cannot roll them between your fingers. So for a quick review, how you tell the difference between pine, spruce, and fir. Spruces are spiky, firs are friendly. Pines grow in clusters in a fascicle. Heather?
So if that isn't enough information to get you narrowed down, you can also look at the cones. And just briefly, there are both pollen and ovulate cones, which is the male and the female cones on pine trees. And we are normally talking about the ovulate cone because that female cone is much bigger and more charismatic, and it holds the seeds. So a quick way to narrow it down is that pine and spruce cones, they hang down from the branch. So if you're seeing them on the tree, they'll be in this orientation. Whereas a fir cone, it's actually upside down, or right side up if you want to think of it that way, where it sits on top of the branch. And if you're thinking that you haven't really seen a fir cone, it makes sense because it's kind of hard to see them intact unless they're still on the tree, because fir cones actually disintegrate at maturity. So when they're ready to spread the seeds that are in that cone, they literally just fall apart, and all that's left is just a pile of cone scales. So if you're walking around and you see a bunch of random scales on the ground, it's probably because a fir has disintegrated its cone. But here we have examples of the other two, the spruce and the pine. And to tell those ones apart, it's really easiest to look at the texture. So here I have, this is from a Norway spruce, and you can see those scales are very thin, very papery, and you can actually hear the difference. It makes kind of a crinkly sound. This is a spruce cone, much more flexible and papery. Whereas pine cones of all different types are much more rigid, much more woody, and don't crinkle quite as well. So this is a white pine cone, but any other pine cone you find is much, much woodier. So that is your quick way to get it down to a genus. And one more thing, I mentioned that these are the seed cones that we're talking about. So inside, this is from a spruce tree. We actually see the seeds. And if you're looking closely, you'll notice that each of those seeds is attached to a papery wing. And that's because these are dispersed by the wind. So when they're ready to be let go by that tree, they literally just fall out of the cone and they float away on the breeze. So we have some other plants here that aren't conifers. Sydney, what do we have in front of you?
So we have ivy and holly, which are of course emblematic of the holiday season. We'll start with ivy, taking a look at it. We only have a picture of ivy because there's just one species that grows native to the U.S. and it does not do very well in ivy, so we weren't able to find a live specimen here. But you can see from this picture that this holly sample has some berries, and only the female plants will grow those berries, which are a good source for wildlife come winter. So that's holly. I also have ivy here. Ivy is an evergreen climbing vine, and that's mostly why we think of it in the winter time, because it still has green leaves. Not native to the U.S., so you won't find many species just growing wild, but we do see them decoratively growing on houses and things like that.
All right, one more plant we'll talk about is the mistletoe, which again, we just have a photo because there's no mistletoe that really grows in this area. There are over 1,000 species worldwide, and there is one species of mistletoe that will grow in southern Iowa, and it actually grows on walnut trees. But here, we just have a photo. But mistletoe is really interesting. It's something that we call an obligate hemiparasite. So what that means is that this plant, in order to grow, it requires that it taps in and parasitizes another plant. So mistletoe is a parasite. And the way that it does this is with these projections called haustoria, which look like little vampire fangs, and they grow out of the stem of the mistletoe, and they tap into the vascular tissue, the xylem and phloem, of a woody plant, usually a tree, and they siphon off nutrients. So this can be kind of harmful to the tree, as you can imagine, not just because it's sort of stealing nutrients, but also because they can grow in a way that's really quite heavy. It can weigh down the branches and hurt the tree that way. But on the other side of the coin, they are very beneficial to wildlife. So birds in particular and other animals will eat the white berries. It's a great food source, especially in the winter. And they'll also use the clouds of mistletoe as a habitat for cover. So it's a little bit complicated, like most things. The tradition of kissing under the mistletoe is one that we are all pretty familiar with. It's not really certain where it began, but it's definitely been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it sort of gained popularity in the medieval era, about 500 years ago. And it started with the lower class sort of as a tradition, and it just spread from there, and now it's pretty much everywhere. So those are our plants. If you want to get a closer look at our holiday greenery, make sure to visit us on Wednesdays from 4 to 8. We're open late those days for our holiday promenade. And if you want to put some of your evergreen identification skills to the test, visit us this Sunday from 11 to 3. We're having a pop-up style door swag DIY workshop. So you can come and work at your own pace. We'll be socially distant and make a door swag to hang on your door this holiday season. So thanks for joining us, and we hope that you hope that you join us next week for another Plant Fact Friday.
Thank you.